Greetings men, greetings women. Okay, this video is not going to be on a specific subject like the others. It's going to be like a State of Europa video, and I'm going to make a series of these depending on what's going on, because it's hard to respond or make a video about a specific thing when there's so many other things that tie into it. So what I might do is I might just make these videos and just basically give you an overview of what's going on in Europe from what I can make out and why it is like that, and just my general insight as a European who's brought up in Britain about how things are the way they are in certain countries to our American folks, because some American folks in the nationalist scene, the alt-right scene and so on, they're a little bit in the dark about Europe and why certain things are the way they are with regard to current events and so on and so forth. I'll start with Britain. Britain right now is in a real fucking state. It really is in a bad state. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I enlisted in the military, I left the military, I've travelled the world, and that includes Europe, that includes Asia, and that includes America. And Europe, from what I can tell, isn't really going to have Britain as a part of the nationalist swing, you know, because there's a swing towards nationalism right now in Europe. And although there was a great, strong core niche of nationalism in Britain, it's outnumbered, outweighed, out-legalised, shall we say. It's outmaneuvered by the legal system than other countries like Hungary, like Poland, like I suppose Finland to an extent, Baltic states, Czech Republic to an extent, even France and other countries. These other countries have a much more, have a much closer movement of nationalism to the mainstream areas without being mainstream. With Britain, and it's such a shame because when I was growing up, you could still see the traces of what nationalist ways were in that country, in Britain back then. And they were slowly fading out. You could see it in the people. I could see it in the older generation that were like not baby boomer, but before baby boomers, and maybe the early baby boomers. But you know, I could see it in their eye and the way they had a work ethic and the way they were good at something. And I saw it in the industry that, you know, that we still had. And the industry was still on its. It was sort of on its it was on its waning days, but it was still there, and it was still at its own strength to an extent. But what we have now, and it really pains me to say this, but I don't think there's any way that Britain will ever come back from its decline. You know, it could be decades before Britain gets anything back to what it was. I mean, and getting on to the side note of what this current situation is, this fucking refugee invader situation. You know, we haven't had anything like this before in living memory. We haven't had anything like this unless you went back to like the Moor invasions of like the into Europe. But when the Moors and the Turks invaded and attacked, and the Barbary pirates raided and things like this, they never stayed. They were sort of like beaten back, or they were like, they'd go, you know, they'd have to make a retreat with whatever they'd taken in the Barbary Pirates case. What we have now is they've occupied areas. We have an occupied fucking Europe. Europe is under a very toehold-like occupation of these invaders. And not only that, there is what you might call the advance guard, or the former colony non-whites who have come into Europe. So this is another fucking continuous millstone around the neck of Europa, because you've not only got like a clear and defined issue with the so-called refugee crisis, you've also got issues going back to like just after 1945, when they let all the colony foreigners come into Europe, namely bloody, you know, Pakistanis, Indians, Caribbean Negroes, and other people from Africa coming into Britain, you know, you had North African people who were non-European. I know there's some people that say North Africa was once white. Yeah, many moons ago, many moons ago it was. But we've got right now you know, France has been massively flooded with the North African people, you know, who are a mixed blood people. I mean, I was looking at the birth rates of non-whites in France, and the bloody percentages were incredible. I mean, it was at its lowest in places like Normandy and Brittany, where it was 8%, 9%, 10%, 11%. Then when you went further into the hinterland, it had increased to 15, 20, 25%. Then when you got to the very south part of France, on the south coast, you know, the fair areas of the rich and famous, the Côte d'Azur and all, I think it's called. It was over. I think it was over 50% 50% in southeast France, and it's, you know, France is not going to be able to come back from this, not without terrible things going on. So, you know, we are seeing right now in Europe a challenge to our people, a challenge to our dominion of Europe, which has always been European, going back to the effing Ice Age, just after the Ice Age, when our people were bloody migrating in from the retreating glaciers and in from the safe havens and areas of the Ice Age, coming into Europe that way. And going back onto the Britain, if you want to be somebody who makes a stand on these issues, you are risking your liberty in Britain. You are risking arrest. You are risking your DNA being stolen from you forcibly by the police. You see, that's another thing. If you are arrested for something in the UK, even if you're released without charge, your DNA is held on record. You know, this is fucking Orwellian shit right there. And Theresa May, the newest ruler of the UK, the unelected ruler of the UK, I might add, she, without shadow of a doubt, hates nationalists. If she could, if the law allowed her, which it doesn't right now, if she could, she would round us all up and dump us in a dark place. I am almost certain of that. She is scary. She scares me more than Thatcher. Because at least with Thatcher, she had quasi-nationalist interests in her heart, although these were very tenuous given the way she went after the industry and the nation's industry and privatised it. But, you know, even she, when she was asked about the nationalists back then, who were a lot more hardcore and a lot more, shall we say, a bit more belligerent, even she said they've got the right to believe in what they believe in, no matter how much I don't believe in it. When she was asked, I'm paraphrasing what she said, but that was the gist of it. This Theresa May, she is a shill of the globalists. A shill of the globalists. Some even say she's a Jewess. Maybe, maybe not. I always say, judge them by their fruits. If the fruits are rotten, they are rotten, and her fruits are bloody rotten. She has imprisoned nationalists, and you might argue in some cases, you know, they deserve the slap on the wrist, or they deserve the slap on the face, but still, she has it in her to go after nationalists if they present themselves in a situation where they have their head above the parapet. She will fucking shoot the head off. She will shoot the head off. First thing she did when she was taking command of the country, when she was taking over from Cameron, was she went to a Jewish synagogue. She didn't just go to the Jewish synagogue. She bloody paid homage at the Jewish synagogue to the Jews, to the rabbis. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority of the people in the United Kingdom are not Jewish. They are not Jews. They are Europeans, Christians, Protestants, Catholics, atheists. Didn't see her go to any church. I didn't see her go to any community centre in a white area, you know. No, she went to the Jews. Why? Who knows? There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of talk about it. All I can say, from my heart, she is a globalist. Not a very strongly vocal one, but she has the globalist mindset. She sees the world in a globalist view. She wants us to be interconnected. She wants us to not to be independent. She wants us to be strangled out of existence. And she wants us, I believe, not wiped out, not openly enslaved, but very, very controlled, so that when the next leader takes over, they'll probably try and maybe go steps further than even she wouldn't dare. How would this ruler go after us right now? Well, she's going to try and police the internet. She is passing laws, trying to get laws done, and currently has some laws that can chase us down or chase people down on the internet. I'm making this video from America because America has the First Amendment. But if I'm in the UK, if I was to make a video like this, I'd be treading on very, very thin ice, you know? If I was to make insightful words, if I was to direct my words in a belligerent way against certain individuals, I would be breaking laws and they would be banging on my door, you know? And this gets me back to my main point. European nationalists who happen to live in the UK or British citizens or whatever, they are a target. And it's hard for us to oppose what's going on in Europe, in certain countries, and one of them's the UK. All right, you might argue, well, you know, you have mostly the freedom of speech because you can debate like the Holocaust, World War II history. Well, yes, you can, but only to a degree, and even that is treading on thin ice, because if you were to say certain things in a public setting, you can be hauled into court over the 1986. There was an act passed in 1986 by Thatcher, and that basically said, if you offend the feelings, I'm not kidding, right? If you offend the feelings of a person from a minority, from an ethnic group, from this, that, or the other, and they are offended, if you have offended them, doesn't matter if you've told the truth to the highest, it doesn't matter if you've told the truth to the 10th power, to the highest almighty, a judge can find you guilty of breaking the law. You see it time and time again in the newspapers. It used to be reserved for maybe the hardcore folks in the nationalist movement who really spout shit off in the street and slag off some ethnic folks, Pakistanis or blacks or whatever, and you know, they got heard. They called them some bad nasty words, and then they'd go and get a few months in jail, or a year or 2 years. But then they expanded it. Now they've made it so that even if you're making the most throwaway remarks, there was a man in a pub, a public house, and he said to a Filipina, a woman in this pub, with the drink in him, during some talk, maybe there was some nationalist overtones to it, because you know this is starting to come to the fore. He said, "Oh, why don't you just go back to your own country?" He didn't call her any nasty insults. He just said, "Why don't you go back to your own people, your own country?" He got arrested by the police. He got sent to court. He got found guilty. He now has a criminal record, and that could affect him in future times, in whatever. And so you see, the law always starts with a very gentle cool down period, and then it gets harder and harder and harder. And that's what we've got in nationalists in the UK. You've got to mind the P's and Q's. So you can be in the street, somebody who's a black or an Asian or a Jew maybe, and they could maybe they can provoke you. And that's another thing about European laws. The law is quite good at protecting people who provoke. There's no law, I don't think there's any law against provocation. There bloody should be, if you ask me. Basically, you can be provoked by these people. I've had it happen to me. I've been walking down the street, and this fucking Negro, Bob Marley, shabby Negro, walking down the hill of the town towards me. I had my music plugged in, and I'm just walking, minding my business, and he just gobs off at me for no reason. He says, "Oh, what did he say?" He said, "Just be careful, yeah." He just said it, "Just be careful, yeah." And I went, what? You know, this isn't normal behaviour, is it? This is what I mean, the fucking abnormal behaviour. What the fuck is this shit? You know, and I'm like, what? I'm doing the double take. And I might have said something after him, like, what the fuck do you mean, mate? Or what do you mean? And he kept on walking. But, you know, this is an example. And these are the ways people get into these troubles. You see it on YouTube, the video of some white guy in in the subway, in the underground, in London, wherever in England, and they're having a rant. You know, they're really putting the world to rights about, you know, blacks, Asians, this and that. They're saying certain things, you know, about what's happened and the fucking rampant ways that they're becoming making us an ethnic minority slowly, things like this. And people slagging him off, saying, oh, he's a racist, and all this nasty words and all this belligerent shit back at him. But what they don't realise is, I would put money on most of these cases having been an instigator via the ethnic minority, via the Asian, via the black. Something being said, them doing something, them being aggressive. I know this, I've experienced this. They are very good at making sneaky, sarky, snidey remarks. It's like they're goading you. It's like, go on, say something. Because they know that the law is on their side. There's no law against provoking someone. The law only goes after the person who finishes the battle, not the person who starts the battle. They start the battle. They never finish the battle, because we normally win the battle, but then we lose the war, you might say. The war being, we go to court, and the judge says, oh, you broke the law because you attacked him, or you said things that offended his feelings, you know. And that's how they do it. And that's one of the crucial ways that the non-whites who are coming into Europe wage. It's almost like a form of asymmetrical verbal warfare, you know. And what does it achieve? Well, it gets them feeling more smug and more powerful, because they know they can do it again and again and again. The people that they've done it to, where it's resulted in a criminal trial, are going to be put into jail, and they're going to be no good to us, because they're behind bars, and when they come out they've got all the restrictions against them for a few years and all this kind of thing. So, you know, the state of Europe right now is really, really difficult. And this is the same in lesser forms in other European countries. Even in Finland, they've got protections against them. They've got a similar law that protects, you know, the newly arrived non-whites, you know. And that's what it is. That's the state of Europa right now. And I concentrate specifically on Britain, because Britain has some of the strictest free speech restrictions. And not only that, they enforce these strict laws. That's the thing. See, the British policing was always hailed for decades and decades and decades and decades after their formation as being, you know, top-notch world leader. Well, there's only one problem with that. The Napoleonic times, when the first professional police force, the French, was formed, the French formed the first professional police force, they warned. They were very cautious about this new-fangled police force. It was along a professional, full-time basis. They said, what happens when the police turn against the people? What happens when the police suddenly start to look for crime where there is no crime? Where they start to suspect everyone as a criminal? And the police and the British followed suit, with the Bow Street Runners as the prototype, and then they came up with the Metropolitan and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, the great positives of British policing has now been turned on its head. The British are discouraged from policing ethnic minorities, going after ethnic crime. Just look at the Rotherham scandal, for God's sakes, you know. And now, if you're a nationalist, they'll be down on you like a ton of bricks. There were some nationalist folks who went on a march against the refugees, as they're sometimes called, the invaders, so-called refugees. They went on a march in Dover. Just a march, protesting, as they should be able to. And when they returned home to their homes, the police raided them. The police raided their homes, kicking in the doors, dragging them out on the street, cuffing them, ransacking the home, going through every drawer. And I'm not making this up. I've heard this with my own ears. I've seen it with my own eyes on the videos that these folks have made. Brave people. One example is the London Forum. They go on the London Forum, which is a very good video channel, that basically is one of the few video channels on YouTube that covers the British national issues that are going on. You know, nationalists there talking about the issues. So, you know, it's a very police state now. It's sometimes been called a soft totalitarian nation, Britain. CCTV everywhere, police breathing down your neck if you say the wrong thing. restrictions against firearms, so you can't protect yourself effectively. I mean, you can't even use fucking pepper spray or CS gas. They class that as a firearm. So that's the state of Europa with Britain.